Good morning, Miami. Welcome to the Bitcoin Developer Funding Panel, Open Source Funding. My name is Mike Schmidt. We have a great panel here. My esteemed colleagues. We have Adi Shankara from Summer of Bitcoin, Ben Price from Openstats and the Bitcoin Company, and Connor Okus from Spiral. Before we get started, I don't know if Matt is out there, but I just wanted to get a round of applause for Matt Odell and putting this together, this open source stage. So some quick introductions. Mike Schmidt, I head up Brink. We are a 501c3 not-for-profit organization who's focused on funding developers that are working on Bitcoin protocol, Bitcoin core, and Lightning technology. We are currently funding 12 developers that are working on that technology right now. And they're in the form of grants as well as our mentorship program for younger developers. And we have an office in London where some of them are congregating, and we're trying to build that out as a bit of a hub. And we also publish the Bitcoin OpTech newsletter, and you should subscribe if you haven't already. So, Connor, do you want to do?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Connor. I work at Spiral. Spiral is an initiative within Block, formerly Square, and we're focused on improving the open source Bitcoin ecosystem through a number of different initiatives. One of those initiatives is our grant program, where we fund over, at this point, two dozen or so developers and designers and some project managers as well, all working on various types of Bitcoin projects, from like Bitcoin core itself to Lightning infrastructure projects to SDKs that make building on top of Bitcoin a lot easier. And we have a global footprint as well. So our grantees are from all over the world, from India to Australia to Southeast Asia, America, Europe, and more. And we want to kind of continue that trend and support developers from other parts of the world as well. And just a quick shout out to some other organizations who also fund open source Bitcoin development, the likes of like Mike at Brink, and what Ben's doing at Openstats, and some other organizations like Gemini, Kraken, Coinbase, BitMEX, all supporting an open source funding, and it really is a community effort, and it's really good to see funding for development moving in a positive direction, really. So like, I'm really happy personally to continue to see that.
Ben?
Hey everybody, my name's Ben Price. I actually have a for-profit and we started a non-profit. The for-profit's called the Bitcoin Company. It's kind of starting as a rewards and loyalty company, moving towards kind of a full stack bank. That's the way we think that we can kind of bring Bitcoin to the most people or consumers in the world. And then what we're here to talk about, or what I'm here to talk about today, is Openstats, which recently launched, which is really exciting. That is a 501c3 not-for-profit with a mission of supporting contributors to free and open source software, specifically around Bitcoin. The board is full of a bunch of Bitcoiners. We're definitely staying focused there. But technically speaking, it's all free and open source software. Anything that helps Bitcoin flourish needs a lot of, I guess there's a lot of like technical dependencies that can help Bitcoin succeed. So we're looking forward to funding all of those. And shout out to I think the developers get a lot of love here, but there's a lot of ways to contribute back to open source, including design, code review, research, just general education. So we're really looking forward to supporting kind of anyone contributing back, not just developers.
Adi?
I'm Adi. I'm the founder and lead at Summer of Bitcoin, where together with an incredible group of open source developers, designers, and sponsor organizations, we are helping university students learn about Bitcoin and contribute to open source Bitcoin projects. One of our flagship programs is where a university student contributes to an open source Bitcoin project under the guidance of a mentor and is paid a stipend in BTC. A number of our graduates have gone on to contribute to Bitcoin Core or joined organizations like Chain Code Labs, Galloy, and Blockstream.
So I'd like to frame the discussion with a story that I think is interesting. I was at a Bitcoin-related event, and I ended up talking to an engineer from an unnamed altcoin, and we were discussing funding, and it so happens that he was involved with a project that happened to raise some funds, and their token scheme, however it worked, ended up netting them $300 million, of which that's not all developer funding, but a lot of that would go towards developers and building the protocol and surrounding libraries. And I hadn't even heard of this particular, they're not even in the top 40, and if you believe in the market cap metric. So you have a non-top 40 network raising $300 million, and we don't have that sort of scheme in Bitcoin. I would say Bitcoin is a little bit more bottom up as opposed to some of these organizations that are top down. And the folks here on stage are part of that bottom up ground effort. And so Connor, to you, how do you guys at Spiral think about the prioritizing open source? Like, why put your energy there? Why is Spiral putting their energy there? Why is Jack getting behind it? Maybe you can talk about a little bit of the motivation there.
Yeah, so I mean, open source software in general, open source development in general is like very synonymous with like public collaboration, self-organizing community. All of the source code is open, available for anyone to kind of download, use, modify, contribute to, and create projects and third-party projects as they kind of see fit. And I think at Square, Square is obviously Square or Block as an organization that has leveraged a lot of open source tools. And Jack, it's no secret that Jack is a big advocate of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin being very much in alignment with Block's and Square's policy and agenda of economic empowerment. It was very much a sense of like, what is the best way we can contribute back to the open source ecosystem? Because like Mike just described, there is no real model behind it. Like, a lot of these large organizations are using tools which we might consider like public goods in the physical world, and governments have very much taken on the responsibility of providing those services, whether it be the street lights, the roads, the bridges, military, for example, and we fund that for our taxes. But I'm pretty sure everyone in this room wouldn't exactly want open source software to be provided by their government. So we're a team, we're an initiative that's like focused on providing funding for open source developers, designers who are ultimately trying to push the Bitcoin ecosystem forward in a number of different ways, whether it be privacy, scalability, decentralization, developer experience, whatever it is, and just providing the support for them to kind of make those projects a reality and sustainable over the long term.
You talk about supporting these projects or individuals. At Brink, we sort of think of this sort of like a funnel. There's this developer funnel specifically for, let's say, Bitcoin contributing. And you have people who have a programming background who maybe start watching some videos. Maybe they attend Summer of Bitcoin program. Maybe they attend Chain Code Residency or Jimmy Song's course, and they kind of work their way through sort of leveling up their expertise in order to get to a point where you could be funded by somebody like a Spiral. And I'm sure there's similar funnels for non-Bitcoin core contributing. But how do you get people interested? Adi, you guys are focused on university students in terms of that funnel that I sort of outlined. Why focus on that demographic?
Sure. That's really an important question, and is at the heart of what Summer of Bitcoin is all about. If you look at the common trajectory of a university student today, in first year of their college, so especially someone who's studying computer science and training to become a software developer. In their first year of college, they pick up a programming language. By second year, they're solving obscure programming puzzles online to get that internship at Google or Facebook by third year. And by the time they graduate, their biggest aspiration is to have an assortment of big tech AI jobs in their kitty. And so they end up joining one of these big tech companies where they're delegated to a team that is maybe resizing buttons or changing fonts every few months. But of course, if you're lucky, you get to join a team that harnesses people's personal data while those same people feel insecure about their lives as they compare themselves to others. And then maybe make them feel a bit better by showing them ads to buy stuff that they never needed in the first place. That's the norm. The exception is, of course, if you didn't do well in programming puzzles, then you compensate by telling your friends that you're too adventurous for big tech and that you're joining a fintech startup, where again, the most that you do is pry on people's private transactions and in the hope of selling them dirty credit. What is really not well understood is that joining big tech today is like joining big cola. Both their business models revolve around triggering the same molecule in your brain. And even if you keep the moral case aside, on the innovation front, you can argue that the sugar water we're drinking today is the same that it was 20 years ago, and the search engine we use today is the same that it was 20 years ago. At Summer of Bitcoin, our message is, if you are in university and you're a budding technologist, you want to work on frontier technologies that flip the way the world runs, working on Bitcoin today is like working on the internet in the 90s. It might make sense to get some, but not only get some, but also work on some in case it catches on. There's also a Straussian case to be made for focusing on university students and introducing them to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a political movement as much as it is a technological movement. You're forced to pick a side either as a global statist or as a sovereign individual. And as free citizens who believe in the promise of sound money, we need to ensure that those in universities today are on the right side of the future, because in fact, they are the future. And this is aside from the fact that the youth is and will be an important constituency that no politician can afford to ignore.
Ben, Adi's sort of talking about getting recruitment, getting people in early, bought in, and sort of like recruiting in that developer pipeline. In addition to recruiting, there's we share some similarities in that we need to raise funds from the community. And so there's recruiting, there's fundraising, and then there's just a general awareness that there is this need and there is talent that is looking to be funded and there is talent that needs to be cultivated. Of those challenges, what challenges do you see from your perspective at Openstats? Where can we do better? Where are the challenges?
I think it's an interesting problem because you have to kind of address all of those issues. There's a study I think OKCoin released recently. I think not a lot of people actually know how Bitcoin is developed. I believe a lot of people think developers are paid, or maybe there is some natural funding mechanism from mining. So I think the first thing is general education and awareness to the community that this thing doesn't really maintain itself in a stable way. You need to let corporations, you need to let users, you need to let anyone leveraging the technology, you need to make sure they're aware that it's funded by a group of developers and designers and coders who are really just not rationally acting. They are providing maintenance and these things for free. Nothing in the world is free. But we're lucky enough to have a few people out there who really care about the mission and the vision of Satoshi to actually build on this thing. These are some of the smartest people in the world dedicating their time for free in many senses. So I think the first thing is making sure that users, businesses, anyone leveraging the technology knows that it's important to give back to the people maintaining it. And then secondarily, you have these pipelines of maybe it's students or well-trained developers coming into the system. But again, it's not economically, we're all Bitcoiners here, we're logical thinkers. The economically rational thing to do if you're a brilliant coder is to go work for Facebook. If you really want Bitcoin, go get $1 million a year job and buy some Bitcoin. Like screw the code base, right? But that's not what we're relying on. We need a way to like build from the ground up, like you said, to create an actual self-sustaining ecosystem. And in order to do that, I think instead of relying on one or two large, exchanges or corporations to do the majority of the funding, well, that's important. That moves the needle. But it's really, I think, to create a self-sustaining ecosystem, you need like a grassroots movement where everyone gives back a little bit. If everyone who's leveraging Bitcoin, everyone who benefits from it, gave back just a little bit, well, then we have enough funds, enough funding, enough training to actually like continue to sustain the ecosystem. So,
Adi, Ben touched on potentially some concerns that somebody might have starting their open source development career, if you will. Financial was the example Ben gave. What do you hear in talking with these younger folks who may be considering a career in open source? Like, are there concerns? What are they excited about?
Sure. We've had about 20,000 university students from over 50 countries around the world apply to our program this year. And the most common question that every student starts with is, will their governments ban Bitcoin? And as they go through our resources, talk to us and join our seminars and study Bitcoin, just like they would study TCP/IP in a networking class. And remember, these are computer science students who are arguably grappling with concepts much harder than those that constitute Bitcoin. They quickly go from hearing about Bitcoin in the media as being this illegitimate child of technology to realizing that the Bitcoin network is, in fact, decentralized enough, resilient enough, secure enough that even if you were to shut down all nodes but one, the network could still run as is and bootstrap itself again. That the Bitcoin protocol is, in fact, one of the most important and beautiful innovations of the 21st century that can change the course of human history. That understanding, coupled with the energy and clairvoyance that the youth can bring to the table is striking and remarkable to see. Having said that, there's a ton of noise in this space with other crypto ecosystems, the lavish marketing budgets, and catchy memes. But so we get all kinds of questions around proof of stake and why can't we have our own coin to decentralize dentistry. But those get quickly answered by themselves when they figure out why is HTTP the most dominant way of exchanging information over the internet, and how Bitcoin is similar in terms of being the dominant way of exchanging value over the internet. We have this internal aphorism in our cohorts where it goes like, blockchain has only two applications. One is money, and the other is marketing. As technologists, we understand that it's never the memes, it's never the marketing that changes the world. It's the technology that works as intended that does. When it comes to helping these students, discover careers in Bitcoin, there's a ton of thought and work yet to be put in. And congratulations to organizations like Spiral, Chaincode Labs, Brink, and Openstats for leading from the front line and showing us the way.
We've talked a bit about individuals and how they can kind of progress and contribute, but there's also a lot of the work that Spiral's doing is project-based, and those projects also go through a sort of evolution from sort of ideation, one developer onwards. How do you guys think about that progression at Spiral?
Yeah, so we're going to publish some content about this very soon, and we're very much thinking about it in this kind of 4-stage process, which I'll try and go through very, very quickly. So phase 1 very much revolves around like a proof of concept. So an individual, a team of developers have an idea that is going to help move the ecosystem forward in areas of that we talk about: security, privacy, decentralization, or whatever it might be. And at this stage, they're very much trying to develop their project architecture. They will be doing some pitching to organizations such as ourselves who would provide no strings attached funding to help them get off the ground. And so like a successful exit from that phase might look like some alpha piece of software that has a code base that makes it easy for new contributors to understand what is happening and also contribute to it, as well as perhaps wider buy-in from the wider Bitcoin ecosystem. Phase 2 is this kind of community development process. So everyone here is very much aware that this Bitcoin thing that we're building, this new money, has a huge community behind it, helping to drive it forward. And we want to see that develop for individual projects as well. So projects might do this by creating a project website, which clearly outlines the vision for the project, helps new people understand how they can contribute, maybe outlines their roadmap as well, and perhaps start developing some async communication channels, whether it be on Discord or Slack or IRC, as well as raising awareness for their projects as well, whether it be podcast, articles, or social media. And again, a successful exit from that phase might look like they have multiple contributors who are fixing various types of bugs, adding documentation, or adding new features. Phase 3 is this kind of multi-entity funded phase where we hope to see a project fully sustainable by having multiple donors. And this might be facilitated and made a bit easier if a project starts to develop a foundation around their project that makes it easier for larger organizations who now see this piece of technology as like a critical part of their tech stack and want to find an easy way to donate without having to do the kind of long process of due diligence on individuals and contributors maybe outside of their jurisdiction. And so a successful exit from that is, again, multiple entities funding a project, and we start to see this project being used in production environments close to like a beta type of software. And then lastly, it's like we want projects to be sustainable without Spiral. So if Spiral were not funding this project, it wouldn't collapse and it wouldn't cause significant damage to the project either. And at this stage, the project's really kind of developed its own culture, its own identity, and can truly stand alone without a single entity. And so we very much look at these projects as active projects within the Bitcoin ecosystem that will be around for the super long term and ultimately, be a part of Bitcoin's legacy. So that's like how we try to think things through and hopefully, keep funding as decentralized as possible.
Ben, Connor mentioned one way that a company can contribute to the space is if they're using the software, they can financially support it. You're in an interesting spot because you're both a for-profit company with a Bitcoin company and Openstats donating on the charitable side. So being in that unique position, how do you, when you have your Bitcoin company hat on, how do you think about contributing to the ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, and like hopefully it's a challenge that the open source ecosystem can kind of do better on. There are a few, I think, really good actors in the space who are doing what they can to give back, at least financially. But there's tons of ways to give back. Like we're a poor startup. I can't just donate $1 million to open source as much as I would love to. So earlier we talked about developers themselves maybe not being economically incentivized, or it's not economically rational for them to pursue open source projects outside of just goodwill. But like as a company, why would it help? I think recruitment's a big one. I got Ben the Carman and Connor in the audience. I think without us, going to these hackathons, without us giving back to some of these open source projects, I'm not going to be able to recruit them. Like that's what drives a lot of people in this space are working on these projects like that. I can't always just say add a widget, add a button, and they're going to be satisfied with their job. So for me, there is some recruiting benefits, some marketing benefits. I also think that like when the beauty of open source is that you can build on it and I can build on it and we both benefit. Like it is a public good that we both win from developing on top of. It's more secure, it's faster, it's better maintained. And so like as you just continue layering on as a company, building on these like core packages, whether it's Bitcoin S or you know, tons of open source things that we use, everyone wins. And so when I give back or with the Bitcoin company, you get a benefit as well. I also think like there are some ways, like especially us, we're a consumer-facing application. So a little bit of what we can do is education, highlighting projects that we really like, giving bounties for things in our roadmap that we just don't have time to develop. One thing that we've tried to hack together is we go to hackathons and we add prizes to the end, in the very end of the pool. So a lot of the issues is hackathon projects are sometimes kind of half-baked. They get 80% of the way done and then no one finishes them. So as a bootstrapping startup, what I can do is go give someone another $500 or a little bit of Bitcoin to finish that off, write a blog post about it, get their actual project out there and hopefully users on it. So there's a lot of ways to give back, including like the one that I'm most excited about is we rolled out referral codes in our application. So this is an easy one. If you sign up with the word Openstats or donate, every time you make a purchase through us, a portion of your proceeds go to fund Bitcoin core development. And so that's like little things that just we're gonna be streaming sats towards Bitcoin core developers every day, all day. And so I think it's just these little things. You have to get creative. Like I said, if you've got $1 billion, just throw some money at some devs probably. If you're poor like we are, you got to get creative. But there's a lot of really interesting ways to do it, and I didn't name them all, but that's what we've come up with so far.
So we clearly have a lot to say since we're over time. So I can speak on behalf of these guys, I'm sure, to say if you want to learn more, feel free to grab any of us after this and we can discuss more. And I would give these guys a round of applause for the work they've been doing.